Salutations all and welcome to part 4 of the conversation with Dale Brunsvold, the reader and recorder of the work of Rudolf Steiner. Welcome, Dale. Welcome back, shall I
Thank you,
say.
sir. Nice to be back.
Yeah, your fourth time. You must be
I'm
enjoying
honored.
it. It's great to
Yeah,
have you here.
always love to talk about Steiner, so it's always fun.
Yeah, it's great to have you here. I'm always getting emails and messages asking where you are and also how so many people deeply appreciate the work that you put in with regards to the reading and recording, almost as though you've created a pathway to the work of Rudolf Steiner. Also, I'd like to personally commend you on that. It's deeply appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Just for the viewers, if you hear any background noises like dogs barking, I've got two large dogs, and it's around about 6:30 in the evening here in England, and when it gets dark, they like to bark. So if that happens, apologies in advance. Okay, Dow, how have you been?
I've been good. Just keep plugging away at the Steiner, and we've had a very nice, well, I say nice in quotes, but it's been unseasonably warm in Denver, and we haven't really had a winter. A couple of snowfalls. Otherwise, it's been in the 50s and almost 60s every day for months. So it's a little unnerving, actually, because it's very dry. They're worried about no moisture. So there's that side of it, but I've enjoyed the warmth. So
Well, here in the
yeah,
UK, we've had the complete opposite. We've had nothing but rain, literally rain every
I
day,
see.
almost as
Wow.
though it's like a some kind of flood that's coming.
Dear me. Yeah.
Maybe we could swap.
I'd take it at least for a week or two.
Yeah. Okay, so we've covered various subject matter with regards to Rudolf Steiner. Um, I know that you don't like to be pinned down to one particular point or another, and we also want to try and keep this conversation and talk free flowing, and we can kind of go in any direction. But one of the subjects that does seem to pop up, especially at the moment, and even for last year, I've been getting questions regarding Rudolf Steiner's take on the Christ.
Okay. Yeah. It's very central, right, to anthroposophy, even though it isn't a religion. It's just a philosophy, except that it's also got a scientific aspect to it because Steiner's claims, and again, we're giving Steiner the benefit of the doubt here. There's no belief involved as such. We're just working with the man's ideas. I just want people to know that. Take it or leave it. Uh, but we're taking that Steiner had a direct ability to perceive the spiritual world, and we want to talk about how that is. That was a question we thought we'd consider as well.
Sure.
And there was a time in his life when and he talks about this, where he says, and this was in the kind of the development of his spiritual abilities, where he met the Christ. He didn't believe in the Christ. He wasn't really very fond of Christianity actually in his time at all. And there's some of the older writings where he's quite critical of it.
Sure.
But he said at this time that he says, I stood before the Christ, or I stood before the mystery of Golgotha in a solemn festival of knowledge. And it was pretty much right after that that he then had the opportunity with the Brockdorf family, as we've mentioned, I think before, to speak about the esoteric world that he had had access to for already a long time, but that, of course, he could never speak of. He would have been a crazy person in regular circles, but this was a theosophical circle, and so he was able to share his ideas there. I think the first lecture was called Goethe's Secret Revelation. And they heard him. They wanted to hear him again. He came back again. In just 2 years, he became the general secretary of the entire German Theosophical Society, and that was kind of the beginning of all that. Uh, so the Christ, though, even there, right, was something very uncomfortable
Yeah.
because in Blavatsky's work, she was very negative about Christ in general, and Steiner just actually later on talked about that being an unfortunate flaw in her spiritual development, which caused her to go in directions that he felt had gone in the wrong direction. Fascinating, really. It opens up this whole idea of people can be massively spiritually developed, and yet it can be in a kind of unfortunate one-sided way.
Yeah.
And later on, especially when they're very developed, their temptations become huge, and many of them fall
Yeah.
because of that. We unfortunately can list a lot of people.
Yeah.
And so when Steiner gave his meditation exercises and his for concentration, meditation, development of the image forming processes of the soul that you practice, it was very difficult. They're very conservative, difficult exercises. And one of the reasons for that was he didn't want people to just have an easy path that would take them in a one-sided direction. That's my take on it anyway.
Yeah.
And that's one reason I really liked him as time went on, however well I can do the exercises. So the Christ then becomes very central. There are anecdotes, they're not facts. He's never mentioned them in an outward way, where when he met Felix Kugutsky, who was an herb gatherer when he was young, and met this man on the train when he would go back and forth, I think, to Vienna for school, that this man was some type of esoteric person, very quiet, didn't proclaim it in any way. But when he met Steiner, there was some connection. And you get the impression Steiner then introduced him to a master that initiated him.
Yeah.
And some talk about Christian Rosenkreuz, the founder, let's say, of Rosicrucianism,
Yeah.
as being one of those. And the other one then is a person Steiner especially names the Master Jesus. And this is like, what does that mean? Right. And so we would need to talk about that. But so again, just to continue answering that question of how central the Christ being in the way that Steiner perceived him, and I say that directly in terms of direct spiritual perception, perceived him,
Yeah.
was. So what do we get? So we get phrases like, the Christ is the most important event, the mystery of Golgotha,
Yeah.
in the history of the Earth's evolution, right?
Yeah.
I don't think the best preacher in the world quite says that, right? He says, for instance, that the Christ is the meaning of the earth. The mystery of Golgotha is
Yeah.
the meaning of the earth. Well, these are, so that may be a good place to just stop there, just to give you how massive
Mm.
the sense of the Christ is in
Yeah.
all of anthroposophy because of those statements. Yeah.
So, I mean, it's fair to say that Rudolf Steiner's um, main idea is that humans are evolving in terms of their consciousness. So this whole whatever it might be in terms of this reality, this realm, historically speaking, along some kind of timeline, it's all about the journey of evolution of consciousness and the human becoming the individual in a true sense. So
Yeah.
what you're saying is that the um this deed or this event was a critical um almost junction of this process of evolution.
Yeah,
Is it?
very much so. And in the picture Steiner gives of the various ages of the earth, you get that the center of the center of the center of it, which happened in what's called the Greco-Latin period of the fifth post-Atlantean epoch, which I know is a lot of jargon there,
Yeah.
that right at the center of that, the mystery of Golgotha occurred. And that was pretty much at the midpoint of the life of the spiritual forces that came from the hierarchies as an inheritance that we all carried with us. So we were carried along by the forces of these beings to a point where they were exhausted.
Yeah.
And our time after death, before reincarnation, was in a place of darkness.
Mhm.
And evolution was in danger of even continuing. And it was at that time then that this cosmic being, the
Yeah.
Christ, so Steiner describes it, was able to, through the incarnation that occurred, was able to infuse the spiritual sphere of the earth with new spring-like forces
Yeah.
that brought us, continued our evolution. That's one picture of it, I think, that he gives.
Yeah. And just for the viewers, maybe they're not too experienced in the work of Rudolf Steiner. Um, is it fair to say that according to Steiner, humans haven't always been the same? So, for instance, when we try to look at these ideas, there's always this assumption that humans are the same back then as they were now, and all the way through the timeline of humanity, humans have always been exactly the same. Am I right in insinuating that Rudolf Steiner, or you can only apply these ideas with the idea that there has been a type of evolution in terms of consciousness, and that humans haven't always been the same in the way that
Nice. That's a nice.
they exist?
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's nice. Sure. So again, we've mentioned these before, and I hope people don't mind my abbreviated description of them. But when we look at the human being, first of all, how is it connected to nature?
yeah,
We end up with four basic bodies that a person has that most people would say, well, I'd never heard of that before, kind of thing. And they're related to the realms, the kingdoms of nature. So we have a mineral body that we get from the mineral kingdom. But we look at the plant kingdom, it has a new set of forces there that aren't involved in the mineral kingdom. We call them life. And we have a life body which replaces about 330 billion cells a day in our organism that are constantly dying away.
yeah,
And then we look again in the animal kingdom. We see another set of forces that kingdom does not have. Arguably, some will say there's some vestiges there. We call them consciousness forces or astral forces. They embody themselves in the sentience in the nervous system. And we have that with the animal realm. So we have these three bodies.
yeah,
And in the course of evolution, these bodies had different relationships to each other
yeah,
in the human being, which resulted in forms of consciousness that were massively different than what we have right now, where all these bodies really in a certain way in us now have all really settled into a very tight connection to each other,
yeah,
and uh, and large parts of them are very dormant, so that right now mostly we take the sense perception organs that are in our physical body and we're just connected to those like crazy.
yeah,
And then we take the sense organ that is our life of thinking, which is in the ego, which we haven't mentioned, that's the fourth body.
yeah,
And the ego sees through thinking a world. And when we take those two worlds and put them together, we form our understanding of existence as we know it now. And as you mentioned, was that the same? Well, Steiner argues that it was very different. Now, how
yeah,
much the physical senses were used is that's a subtle thing. I don't want to get too comfortable with it.
yeah,
But if we go back into the past, we end up with a form of consciousness, let's say in early Egyptian times, that wasn't individualized.
yeah,
That was a that there was a hive like, shall we say, I have to use that word, but it was human, so it wasn't quite that
yeah,
thing, even though hives are pretty amazingly intelligent. Uh, and this was far beyond even that. And yet at the same, so there was a wisdom that poured through that, through the hierarchies.
yeah,
Because these bodies were far out here, the spiritual world was able to live into these beings very profoundly.
sure.
We only experience the shadows of their activity and call them thoughts.
Yeah,
They experience the living presence of these beings in us, but it coerced them. They
yeah,
were, in a sense, pulled in hither and thither like a hive is, you might
yeah,
say, exhibited magnificent wisdoms.
hmm,
Uh, and then over time, that fall occurs where we go and we divorce ourselves from the spiritual world.
yeah.
I don't know. Did I lose my way on that answer?
No, 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 no.
Okay.
I mean, I've got this. This is I have to caveat this. This is my theory.
Okay.
That historically, when there's sort of a discussion about giants, I tend to see that as a more of like a group consciousness as opposed to a giant in and of itself. So it's almost like a instead of I don't know one person being one person, 1,000 people could become one mind. which would
Interesting.
represent
Yeah.
a giant. Um, I generally don't kind of go along with the idea that there were giants, although there could have been. I tend to think of it more like a giant mind, maybe. And these sort of
Sure.
mythological giants are a representation of a giant mind, of a collective of people or so-called individuals, maybe. Just an
Yeah, that's
idea.
interesting. I hadn't thought of it that way before. In fact, as you say it, it even gives me an idea I hadn't had before. Again, these are just speculations. Steiner doesn't say this that I know of.
Yeah,
That in that time of those Egyptian times, instead of having direct, hard, concrete, sense-based experience, they may have had some of that, but a lot of it was also profound clairvoyance.
yeah,
Again, not with a centered eye, not with an individualized experience, but some kind of experience was had, right?
yeah,
And I could imagine them perceiving someone of very, very lofty development, let's
hmm,
say standing in front of them, and not just seeing with their physical eyes, they'd be the same size you and I are,
yeah,
but with their spiritual vision that they
yeah,
had at that time, seeing a massive being spiritually
yeah,
whose aura was huge. That could have been a kind of giant. I
yeah,
just thought of this now. So another way of, oh yeah, were those the giants? Because they
yeah,
are giants. I mean, it's like that wonderful anecdote of Owen Barfield's. You know, he had met Steiner and a number of times and was an early member of the society in Britain, famous, by the way, writer in Britain, Owen Barfield. And
yeah,
he said, over time, I tried to get a handle, take the measure of the stature of Rudolf Steiner.
yeah,
And over time, it became a burden too excessive to be borne. It was so overwhelming to him. And yet here's
yeah,
this guy who was very slight. He was a very slight man, Rudolf Steiner
yeah,
was, who was probably, if we could have seen him spiritually, a giant, unquestionably, right?
yeah,
And other people, same thing, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
We're a little far afield of it. That's fine.
well, I mean, in terms of like practical terms, you can kind of see it in life with regards to movements, trends, fashions. So there's almost like a sort of a bigger collective uh, consciousness, but at the same time,
Hmm.
we're kind of aware of some remnants of an individual or individualized person. And I think, like, for the most part, that is probably one of the causes of most of the problems in contemporary life. This confusion between am I an individual or am I a group, and the conflict between
Uh,
that, and the conflict between individuals and groups. There's almost like an insecurity of not knowing. Maybe this is part of the evolution. Maybe we're at this almost a critical or tipping point between the individual and the
hmm.
group.
Yeah, that is an interesting thing. I mean, you notice that a lot of people fall into what we call these group cults,
Yeah,
and you kind of feel sorry for them or you might judge them in some fashion. But I can imagine because of the nature of the ego right now being so fundamentally enclosed in itself and shall we say alienated from so much around it, that when it falls into these groupings of other people and feel connected to them with incredible strength and power,
yeah,
it probably exaggerates itself because of the isolation they felt before. They
yeah,
feel so fulfilled. They feel so rich in themselves again, right? Isn't that interesting?
yeah,
Right. And so that kind of addresses what you're saying too. And yet at the same time, the self that we think we are, we know from esoteric work of all kinds, um, isn't much. I mean, it's a lot of selves.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. In terms of like all the many eyes.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. And so for instance, it's fair to say that there is a lot of kind of conflict, not necessarily war. I would say that's the other end of the spectrum. But in terms of like the the harmonized being, so it's almost like we could only ever have harmony once the individual is harmonized within oneself.
I think so.
Yeah.
That's how I see it too.
Um, there's a saying, there's many different ways of saying it, but there's a saying that goes something like this. we build the world the way that we react to it. So we build
Nice.
the
Yeah.
world the way that we react to it. So it's almost like this symbiotic relationship with, say, for instance, evil or bad things in the world. We react to it and actually produce more evil, or vice versa. Um, we have a possibility. There is that possibility for us to harmonize ourselves and not react to what we might perceive to be a negative. And I think in terms of the exercises that Rudolf Steiner would give in terms of seeing the positive. So it's almost a way of recatalyzing whatever it is that we're perceiving or receiving from the world in terms of like a feedback.
Yeah, I like what you said, right? Because that react really, the word that comes up in my mind is an automaticness,
Yeah,
right? That we automatically react, that there isn't a self
yeah,
involved in that moment,
yeah,
being free in itself to not react but respond,
yeah,
right? Might be the alternative word. And you just get a world of strange machine-like destruction. It seems
yeah,
to me it doesn't do much positive ever. Yeah,
yeah.
reactions.
Well, I mean, oftentimes when we're confronted with what we would perceive to be evil, it's almost as though the correct reaction would be more evil. Um, Whereas, for instance, within the esoteric sciences or the esoteric world, when we have a possibility not to react, not to be an automaton, to bring consciousness or a conscious decision or conscious response, then we have a possibility to reconcile the polarities of what we're experiencing and what we see in the world. Um, and to actually not reflect, but almost project a reconciled version of our reality. I wonder if that's connected to the Christ impulse or the principle of the Christ in terms of some kind of reconciliation between opposing impulses or forces or
So we have a lot to cover in that, right? Gosh, where could we begin even? The There's a fascinating lecture by Rudolf Steiner. I'm going to try with this. I'm going to start with this and see what you think.
right.
Called "Human Ego and Cosmic Ego." Okay, I think it was about 1913. It's in a book called uh, Esoteric Christianity and the Mission of Christian Rosenkreuz.
Mhm.
Okay, and it's on the Rudolf Steiner audio site. Um, in there, he talks about beings going through their human evolution on the moon, the old moon evolution. And I'm sorry, people, if you don't know what that is, it's in occult science or esoteric science, and you can study it in there a little bit, or we can overview those again. But I think we talked about them earlier.
Yeah,
And on the old moon, there were a certain set of beings, and they were striving for their full humanity. But by the end of that evolution, many of them didn't had not achieved what we call the fifth, sixth, and seventh principles of a human being. Now, in our time, those are a transformed astral body, which
yeah,
becomes a spirit self. That's the fifth one. A transformed etheric body, which is life spirit, and then a transformed even physical body, which becomes the spirit man that stood before us at the end of the mystery of Golgotha. So then what happens? Well, then the moon evolution goes into kind of a spiritual state that Steiner says was in a spiritual state so high, you might say that he could not see it. So
yeah,
that's called a pralaya in the Hindu terms, where it's so deep. And then it reemerges again. And when it reemerges, it's the beginning of what's now called Earth evolution.
yeah,
And during that time in Earth evolution, here come these beings that had not achieved the fullness of their human stage of evolution on Old Moon. And but now they're in the completely different conditions of the Earth, and they're seeking out on the Earth or in the Earth sphere where they can continue their evolution. What environment is there
yeah,
for them to, as an arena for them to live into, and then it will be suitable for
Yeah.
them to continue their evolution, right?
Yeah.
And what they find, of course, is the only place they can find is the human soul. Only in the human soul can they actually continue their evolution. Now, does that mean they're evil? Because we call these beings Lucifer. These are the Luciferic beings.
Yeah.
So they are just almost like magnetism. They're just drawn to the human soul as a place for them to continue their own evolution. So what happens? Well, depending on how far they've gotten, did they get to the fifth but not the sixth and the seventh? Did they get to the fifth and sixth parts of their being but not the seventh? Steiner stays in this lecture with the sixth and the seventh. He doesn't worry about the fifth for some reason. But what happens is when they engage with certain individuals and their evolution is, let's say, being very efficacious,
Yeah.
what manifests through the people, the person, is they become geniuses.
Okay.
So Steiner argues that virtually every genius that you could find in the world has fundamentally a Luciferic being as the igniter of this special capacity of their being, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of wild, huh? Okay, so you're okay, and he calls these principles that they have that they're working on microcosmic principles. So it's, shall we? And I've always struggled with this, but I'm saying it's, it's one particular Luciferic being's own struggles with his transformation of his etheric body or whatever. But
Yeah.
then they're in the souls of human beings. They're causing this genius thing to occur. So then he says, well, now we can look at the Christ. If we look at the Christ, we're not looking at a being who has microcosmic principles, but instead is unfolding macrocosmic principles.
Okay.
Oh,
Yep.
okay. I have to think about that, right? I mean, this is a really wild lecture, really. It is. I've read it
Yeah.
many times and I'm still trying to fathom it, but it's so captivating. It's one of the most beautiful lectures when you finally start to grab
Yeah.
hold of it that he's ever done, in my mind. And he says, and what happens is you realize, he says, is that as the Christ is unfolded with humanity through the Saturn and the sun evolutions, and then the moon evolution, now the earth evolution, that one aspect of his being has held back his own evolution
Yeah.
so that he stays, in a sense, lockstep with humanity.
Uh-huh.
And then and so in our time, he has unfolded the macrocosmic ego.
Yeah.
And that macrocosmic ego is in the process of being shining down and penetrating through freedom, because it is an invasion like Lucifer's work is in our bodies, right?
Yeah.
However free and genius you are, it's something that can cause a lot of problems in your life. So
Yeah.
this ego, this macrocosmic ego, is finding its way into the, let's say, initially prepared ego that each of us thinks we are,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But we really are the Christ's ego, ultimately. This is the interesting thing about the unfolding of this whole thing. So he says, what's that going to look like? What's it going to look like as more and more the macrocosmic ego of the Christ being penetrates into human beings? He says, well, how it will manifest is humility. How it will manifest is loving sacrifice for others.
Uh-huh.
How it will, isn't that something? And when
Yeah.
you read that, and after he's really built up these Luciferian, you're like, yeah, when he talks about Christ, it's really going to be cool, right? And it's exactly in this stunning way, unbelievably the opposite of that. It's the humble monk walking to Washington, D.C., shall we say, or something,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
As happened, only in love, only in caring for others, only in working on harmonizing their own being more. You know what I mean? Because they're not done either, right? So there's a picture of this uh, nature of Christ in a way, right? That is unfolding. We would hope, right, in us. And you were talking about, well, what about evil and stuff? Here's a line that really has, especially in the last year, has helped me out a lot. And that is Steiner says in one of his lectures, and he says, all wisdom is crystallized pain.
Yeah.
So, well, pain is evil. Well, suffering is we don't want that, right? That's got to be the bad thing, right?
Yeah.
And yet, if I didn't have it, I'd sit on my couch and eat potato chips and watch movies all day long. I mean,
Yeah.
if there's no resistance from the world, right, obviously, then
Yeah.
the human being isn't going to push back,
Yeah.
wake up, and grow more, right? I mean, it just isn't
Yeah.
going to happen.
Yeah.
And at the same time, that there can be so much evil that to my mind, as a social being, as a people caring about each other in the Christ's energy,
Yeah.
that they become so beaten down by it that they can't get up, and we are called upon to help them, right? Because they can go too far, right? It's a balance.
Yeah.
It's a balance. The evil can be so overwhelming that there's no hope for them. And this incarnation, even though he says all that suffering, in fact, does build powers and forces in a human being that in the next incarnation
Yeah.
will, in fact, bear fruit. But
Uh-huh.
I don't know. You got to be dangerous with that as a comfortable conclusion. Yeah, I won't worry about them. Next incarnation, they're going to do fine or whatever, right? And
Well,
that goes back. Let
yeah.
me say one last thing. That
So,
goes back to when Steiner worked with medical doctors a lot, and he would work with trying to have certain medicaments. So there was a person who was dying, and he was with Ida Wegman. And all through the night, they would try a medicament that Steiner spiritually saw that might work. Didn't work for the person. They tried another one, didn't work for a person. Tried another one, it didn't work for the person. And as the morning hours came along, this person died. And during the day later, Ida Wegman was having a talk, she was a medical doctor, was having a talk with Steiner. She said, Dr. Steiner, didn't you kind of though know that he really was going to die anyway, even before you began helping me? And he goes, well, yes, I did know that, he said, but that can never be a reason for a human being not to lovingly try to help another to the very end.
yeah. Yeah.
So I just want to throw that out
Yeah.
too.
No, beautifully said. I think part of all of this, I mean, kind of rewinding a bit, it becomes more apparent that we're living in some kind of mm, multi-cosmic game of evolution. So there are lots of struggling forces in terms of evolution. So there's almost like evolution within evolution. It's very easy to just look at like it's all about human evolution and discount any other um, uh, beings or forces that are also trying to evolve in the process. And I would say because of that, things like community suddenly take on a whole new different angle in terms of evolution. I think we inherently know that it's useful to help somebody else, especially people that we don't know. I mean, as Jesus says, love thy enemy. You know,
Yes. Yeah.
there's m way more to that than just trying to love somebody that you don't like, as an example. I think there's way more in terms of the ability to evolve out of that interaction of even trying to love thy enemy. Maybe we don't quite get there, but at least the attempt of trying to love thy enemy.
Amen, man.
But
On that one. Yeah.
it's easier said than done.
Yeah. Well, it's always the striving, isn't it? I mean, when you're doing weights or something,
Yeah,
in any particular action, nothing seems to be occurring, right? But in the end, months later, there's more strength in the organism. Well, I think that spiritually applies,
yeah,
and that's very Buddhist, right? It isn't the effects of your striving that matter.
yeah,
It's the striving that matters.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and when you look into nature, just on a real sort of fundamental level, when you look into nature, literally one negative is somebody else's positive. Um,
Ah,
you know, look at the animal kingdom, look at the way plants and soil, trees, plants, one thing demises or yeah, one thing can demise at the growth of something else, and it's forever going on. I did read about, and I can't remember which book it is in, um, where Rudolf Steiner would say to, for instance, look at your hand and say to yourself, this is me, like to have a real sort of vivid realization that this is me. And then to look at
Okay.
a plant and say, this is also me. So that you go into some kind of symbiotic relationship with what we would ordinarily say, well, this is me and that's not me. At a profound level.
Yeah, at a
Ordinarily, we,
profound
we go
level. Yeah.
around saying, well, this is me and that's them, and there's a separation. But in reality, when we examine nature, eventually we become the soil, and the soil
Hmm.
becomes something
Yeah.
else, and then somebody else will eat whatever was produced from the soil, and it goes round and round.
Yeah.
It keeps going. Like, yeah, it's reciprocating.
Yeah. When you talk about positive and negatives, it's like, well, if you sat in a room closed off with no air, you would breathe yourself to death
Yeah,
because you change all the oxygen in the room to carbon dioxide and die,
yeah,
right? But that carbon dioxide feeds the plant realm.
uh-huh, yeah,
So it's a very positive thing there. And then they give us back oxygen, just as a mundane example of these
yeah,
processes. And we're deeply involved in them, yeah, especially with our breathing, which shows that we're not compact,
hmm,
isolated being. We have to breathe all the time
yeah,
and that's the outer world coming into us all
yeah.
the time. Yeah.
Um, I think some people, including myself, struggle with sometimes the concept or the idea of like impulses. And if we are living in some kind of like farm or food factory, there has to be an input output. And in terms of invisible influences or impulses, so we could say the Araman impulse or Luciferic impulse or Christ impulse. Um, could you talk a little bit about the impulses and from a Steiner perspective?
So a little bit, and I wish I knew more. I mean, it is a topic of intense interest to people I know, and I'm sorry, all you people that have listened before, and I should know more about these things. Uh, so what I'm going to take a certain tact on this, that were moments in the evolution of humanity, in terms of our consciousness and everything, where we opened like a flower in a way that allowed Luciferic and Ahrimanic beings to enter into us where they couldn't before.
Yeah.
This is fascinating, right? So there
Mm.
was a time in what's called the middle of the Lemurian epoch, which was before Atlantis. I don't know how many tens of thousands of years or hundreds of thousands of years ago that was,
Sure.
where beings called the spirits of form, or the exousiai in the Greek, or Elohim in the Hebrew, right?
Yeah.
That these spirits of form, which are above the archai, so you have the angels, the archangels, the archai, and then you have these spirits of form, they uh, gave us the beginnings of the ego on the earth. And that was the beginning of reincarnation, which hadn't occurred before. And in a few, a number of thousands of years later, won't be occurring anymore. And when that occurred, right around that time, I think it was the same time, it opened up an aspect of the human being in which the Luciferic world could enter into our astral bodies.
Yeah.
And this again is that thing we were talking about. Hey, a place I can live. And they
Yeah.
jump in there, right?
Yeah.
And what that did was it excited the astral body too much.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
that the ego, as it achieved experience, and let's call it sense experience, it liked it a little more than it should have. It was
Hmm.
sensual. It had become sensual, whereas before it would have had an objectivity that wouldn't have interfered, in quotes, interfered with our evolution.
Yeah.
So we started to get drawn more and more into it, which caused the fall into matter more and more and more until we're where we are now,
Yeah.
in a way, right?
Hmm.
And this is a lot to do with our astral body being too interested, more interested than it naturally would have been. And really, we can see Buddhism arising from a deep awareness of that desire body's corruption,
Yeah.
saying if you could heal that desire body, you don't have to reincarnate anymore. Even though that's only one branch of Buddhism, there's different
Yeah.
ones now, of course. So then we get that. And there were, Ahriman did play into this a lot after that because it's thousands of years. And there were but I don't think it was until you get to 1413 in the beginning of the Renaissance, you get to a certain stage of unfolding of the evolution of consciousness, where again, a flower kind of opens in us, and the Ahrimanic being can really come into humanity in a very individualized way.
Yeah.
And when that happens, our thinking, now, see, I got to be careful. I say this as close to correct as I can.
Mhm.
Where our thinking began to, and the same thing that was happening is our spiritual perceptions were almost gone, right? So we were maybe even in a shadowy area. We didn't have spiritual perception anymore. The Dark Ages, I guess they were called, right?
Yeah.
And what this enlivening of the thinking life as a cold, unspiritual cognitive activity did was allow us to take our sense perceptions and really, really then, in an objective way, penetrate into matter.
Yeah.
And one of the first things, as people have said, that arises, let's say, in the realm of art, is all of a sudden we care about perspective. We care
Mhm.
about the three-dimensional aspect in paintings. We didn't care about it before.
Yeah.
I'm sure we saw it, but now all of a sudden this thinking that changed our kind of experience of ourselves in the world caused that to happen. And then if you look just at 500 years, the scientific breakthroughs and penetration of the world, all the way to the splitting of the atom, let's call it that,
Yeah.
right, that has occurred, you could say is because of Ahriman, right?
Yeah. Hmm.
So those two forces now live in us in such a way that Steiner describes it sort of like this. He says, Lucifer's powers, and we've talked about this before, Lucifer's powers in us, uh, how do we know this? They want us to uh, not care about matter anymore. We want it, and we're so deep in it. I can imagine there's a lot of ourselves that doesn't. Well, we're just too deep in this now, right?
Yeah.
And that we can uh, escape. We can escape the world, and we can become gods, and
Okay.
we don't have to incarnate anymore, and we can just carry on in only a spiritual way. And he talks about what we would even look like if that were to happen. And that's one side of things, right? The other side is Ahriman's influence, saying, no, there's no spiritual world of any kind. As we know, our physical senses reveal nothing of it,
Yeah.
blah, 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 right? And so uh, what we really need to do is become even more material than we are now. We have to realize that our instincts are the important part of ourselves. Our animality is more real than this human thing we think, this humanity thing we think we are, which isn't really even real. We're really animals, right? That's what our science tells us
Yeah.
in the way that it's captured by Ahriman, right?
Hmm.
So, so we have these two forces in us, and we they are a battle that we're struggling with. Because there are times I would want to fly off into the do lunch with God kind of thing. And then there's also times where I need to concentrate or my life depends on it, that I'm clear and objective in my thinking. And I don't need any spiritual stuff right now. I got to get this straight, what's going on. So those are kind of battling.
Yeah.
And Steiner then describes how the Christ stands between those two and in a tension filled polarity creates a balance
Yeah.
that we could say is a balance, right?
Yeah.
And in the Christ, then, what do we find? Well, we find that through others, we really do balance these forces, and they're very important for our development. Steiner says if they hadn't happened, there would have been a certain kind of development, but because they did, and if we're successful,
Yeah.
our development will be much higher than it otherwise would have been.
Yeah.
So there's that strange side to it too. Uh,
Yeah.
okay, yeah, that's good enough. Hopefully,
Thank you.
sorry again, probably though.
Um, there's always a sort of confusion between Lucifer and Satan. There's always a sort of like a conflation between the two, and that if Satan or if Lucifer is Satan, then therefore Lucifer is bad. Whereas in the ideas of Rudolf Steiner, it's not that at all. In terms of that, there's a necessity for the Luciferic impulses for evolution, and that Lucifer is, we could say, a fallen angel that is redeeming or can be redeemed. Whereas Ahriman, would it be fair to say Ahriman is more of a representation of what would commonly be known as Satan, and that redemption maybe isn't possible for Ahriman? Does Ahriman just keep falling and descending deeper into matter until it's irretrievable?
Yeah, the fallen nature of Ahrimanic beings actually began in what's called ancient sun, before the ancient moon that the Luciferic beings rose up out of, right? And so they are kind of more powerful. Um, I can't recall. I just want to say they're redeemable, but I don't know if I tend to be that way about love and think love's going to be able to overcome everything eventually, right?
Yeah.
But I don't recall exactly how he talked about the redemption, if it's going to happen. Yeah. There's a picture he gives of the far, far future, the end of Earth evolution, or maybe it's even after Jupiter or something, where there'll be a part of humanity that just can't be saved.
Yeah.
I hate this story, by the way.
Yeah. Yeah.
It just can't be saved. And they will sort of be on the leftovers of the earth that are just utter mineralized substance, concrete or something. And there'll be an Ahrimanic colony there, kind of going along its own separate evolution. And
Hmm.
maybe he just tells that to us to show us that that could happen, and that's how much we have to battle the forces to make sure it doesn't. Maybe it's a, you know,
Yeah.
opposite psychology thing.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yes, so in the Bible, it talks about these things in a kind of a helter-skelter way, and the devil and Satan and maybe Lucifer's mentioned, I don't know. And Steiner does say that there were these two beings very powerful. And in fact, I don't know, should we turn this here? Let's see if you can see this picture.
Oh
Is
yeah.
that actually very visible
Yeah. Yeah.
or is it too small?
No, you can see it. Yeah. Yeah.
You can see it. Now, this is a 30-foot statue that Steiner sculpted
Yeah.
called the representative of humanity. And one of the things it describes is the three temptations that are described in the Bible. So the first one you can't see it here, but right here on this side, there's a hand right here. Sorry, this is probably too small, but that's Lucifer falling, and
Yeah.
it's falling because of the touch of this gesture of this hand. It's not grabbing him, it's not pushing him around. It's just offering love, maybe. I don't know, right? So
Mhm.
that falls, and that has to do with that first temptation. And I don't know if I get them in the right order. Throw yourself down, and I will raise you up, and you won't be hurt. Right?
Mhm.
That's that going off into the heavens. No,
Yeah.
no, only by the word of God we are. And then Steiner says the second one, where I will give you the kingdoms of the world to be the ruler of. He says that one is the two, Ahriman and Lucifer, working together right here.
Okay.
They're kind of intertwined right there. There's Ahriman here, Ahriman here, and Lucifer here, who's off to the side. And and only by the word of God can humanity, can a human being evolve and all this stuff. And then
Yeah.
finally, the last one has to do with turning and Steiner says those two temptations were overcome. But the third one was, you know, if you are God, turn these stones into bread, and I'll give you that power, etc.
Yeah.
And that one's more ambiguous because Christ couldn't, shall we say, completely overcome that. That evil was still there. Either
Yeah.
you have to work for your food, or you have to grow it, or whatever has to happen. But there's this material existence that still has to be taken account of,
Yeah.
and that type of thing. So in essence, Ahriman is regarded as Satan in the Bible. Lucifer might be the devil, but I'm not sure if it's devil and Satan. Now, if all of a sudden I've lost my connection there. Lucifer, I don't think they use the word Lucifer, do they, in the Old New Testament? I can't
It's
recall,
quite
to be honest with you.
it's controversial. I think it was added at some point. From,
Oh, I
from
see. I see. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a biblical scholar, but from what I do know, that it was added at some point
Yeah.
from the original
So we
version.
so we have this balance between these three, and the Christ. If you could stay centered in the Christ, then these two powers are both positive.
Okay, yeah,
If you can, right?
yeah,
So that and you find that, of course, in our time, especially on the internet, that people want to make enemies of them. They want them to be bad and gotten rid of.
yeah,
There's a lot of that energy. We got to get rid of Armand. He's bad,
yeah,
and that's simply not ever said by Steiner.
yeah,
And it goes back to love your enemy, I suppose. It goes back to as we've talked about the need for evil for evolution to continue. As ugly as that phrase sounds,
yeah.
right? Yeah, you know.
Well,
Yeah,
you could ask the question: Is evil is it a necessary risk for um, free will? Is it a risk worth taking for us to have any idea or notion of free will? There has to be the chance that we might fail, which is evil.
yes, yeah.
Yeah. So,
I
so
mean,
for
yeah.
instance,
I mean, if okay, ahead. Go ahead.
yeah, just quickly. So, if it's about
Take your time.
evolution, if it's about evolution, then in order to have evolution, there has to be the possibility for involution. It, I guess it can't just be in one direction. It can't just be evolution. For there to be true evolution, there has to be the possibility of a involution or falling.
Yeah, I guess so. And there was some moment in Steiner's life, apparently, when he understood these two streams, and it was a big revelation to him, but he never articulated it anywhere that I was able to understand. But he did talk about involution, particularly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So, sorry, I hope that isn't too bothering you. My wife will get that maybe, but yeah.
Yeah, he
Um,
was gonna say something. I interjected.
I forgot. Yeah, I was trying to
Apologies.
remember it. It's all right. Yeah. Involution, evolution.
Okay, just
Okay,
one.
I'll set that off. Sorry about that. Yeah.
That's
Okay.
okay. That's okay. Um,
Um,
we mentioned earlier in the sort of pre-talk about the spiritual being inside of the physical, and it's very easy to once one gets on some kind of spiritual journey or path of some description, to almost reject or repel the physical world. Um, Maybe it's a sort of Luciferic impulse that comes into one to spark that sort of spiritual seeking or journey. Um, but from what I can figure out, Rudolf Steiner was very much into seeing the spiritual inside the physical, as opposed to rejecting or trying to escape the physical world.
yeah, in fact, that was really the path, you might say, of anthroposophy that needed to happen for humanity to begin to turn in that understanding again. Otherwise, Armand would become completely victorious, I guess I would say, right?
Yeah,
Yeah. So, and I think that those bodies he talks about, the physical, the etheric, the astral, the I, when you really look at them, you realize that each one of those is represents in us an entire spiritual world. So we say the mineral kingdom, well, that doesn't seem very spiritual, but let's just give it that. But if we look at the plant realm and we look at the etheric forces that are replacing these 330 billion cells a day in our bodies,
yeah,
that we usually say, oh, look, there it is. There's life. I've got cells dividing. Yep, that's life right there. And you can, and I always think now of that and imagine Plato's cave analogy
yeah.
where I'm tied to these chains and I'm watching a wall and there's shadows on the wall. And I think those are real.
Hmm.
That's the real, in fact, it is the real world. That's the point of the analogy.
Yeah,
And if and we would say, no, this isn't life. This isn't life happening here. This is the result of spiritual forces
hmm,
interpenetrating the physical world.
yeah,
And once an organism has this wonderful way of them finding purchase in it, so these forces don't in a rock, but they do in me, then they start their activity. They produce this activity in the organism. We can't see the spiritual forces called etheric forces. We can only see their activity. And so we mistake the activity for the thing itself.
Okay.
That makes sense. That's
Yeah.
my take on this, right? And why do I care? Well, because if I could see the etheric forces, that is a realm of the spiritual world. That is a world of the spirit.
Hmm.
And with Steiner's ideas, we're starting to see that as a plausible idea. It's like a beautiful Archimedean lever to offset the dogma of materialism,
Yeah.
right? And so he would see, a child given certain substances at 8 years old and see that at 50, certain things are going to happen because there's a causality in the life world, the
Yeah.
etheric world, that's as real as me bashing a hammer on a rock. I can watch that thing shatter. I can do all the math on exactly which direction every piece of it's going to go. I have
Yeah.
complete transparency of consciousness here, and I have complete opacity of consciousness in the life realm, right?
Yeah.
Interestingly, right?
Yeah.
Except for we're jiggering around with DNA and stuff now and stuff.
Mm.
And then we look at the astral world and we see the same thing again. We have consciousness. We concentrate on consciousness itself rather than on the world of spiritual beings, angels, let's call them, that are working into that world. But because we can only experience consciousness, Steiner says, through its being reflected by the brain. So we can only see consciousness on the physical plane because the brain is there to reflect the spiritual activity called consciousness
Yeah.
in such a way that I can perceive it with my the nature of my nature now, right?
Yeah.
But that's a whole other world. That's a whole other world of the astral world. It's a whole other world of spirit, qualitatively, interestingly different from
Yeah.
the other one. Again, these things are worked with in biodynamic agriculture and Waldorf education and anthroposophical medicine. So over time, over the centuries, I think
Hmm.
these ideas will become more and more plausible, and maybe they will help awaken. And here's the funny part of this, right? The organs of perception that are in our etheric body,
Yeah.
the organs of perception, then they're dormant right now. And the organs of perception that are in our astral body that are dormant right now. And this is what meditations and stuff are trying to do, is through the tempering of the soul, cause these organs to reawaken. And when they reawaken, they receive data. Let's
Yeah.
call it, that's an ugly word, from their respective realms. So you get an astral world. I can perceive it. I'm not believing it anymore. I
Yeah.
get an etheric world. I'm perceiving an elemental being. I'm not believing in it anymore. I'm knowing. So this is a path from, shall we say, some kind of belief system, which I'm not into, to some kind of knowing, which I really want to have. And I don't have that. So does that help? Is that and
Yeah.
the ego is,
Yeah.
we do see the world of ideas. So that's cool. And I don't know why people don't see that as a spiritual activity. Even if
Yeah.
it's only the reflections of the brain, it's not matter. It doesn't have a weight. It doesn't have a measurableness. It has no qualities of our physical, regard for reality. Yet without it, the world is perfect chaos without it.
Yeah.
Light, shape.
Yeah. I tend to, my definition of spiritual is basically the unseen. So it covers a broad scope from forces, impulses, all the way through to ideas, uh, thoughts, imagination, visualization. Now, if it's not actually spiritual, but it's probably as close as you can get to it on the level that we can function. Um, Changing things a little bit, I've been working with some symbolism lately, and one of the symbols is the monad, which is the circle with the dot in the middle. And I often find when I work with symbols, I get quite a lot of sort of synchronicities. And I was listening to yourself actually, um, one of the lectures, I can't remember which one it was, and Rudolf Steiner says about when you direct your awareness or attention or concentration into the center, the manifestation appears on the outside. So it's almost like ordinarily we're looking out, our awareness is beaming out into the world, and we neglect whatever it is in terms of our being or center in the middle. Whereas if we redirect our attention, concentration into the center, then it reappears on the outer.
Oh,
It's almost like
nice.
you go so far in that it starts to come from the outside back in. Um, I found that for myself, I found that very profound with regards to things like meditation and concentration and strengthening as opposed to trying to, and this is, I said to you earlier in the pre-talk, with regards to meditation, I've always had a slight aversion to the sort of common known idea of meditation being almost a nihilistic or disassociation or no thoughts, running away from like the mind or the thinking. Um, I much prefer sort of Rudolf Steiner's approach in terms of the strengthening of thinking so that it can be used for its true purpose in terms of being able to sustain its attention so that we actually have the possibility to respond, maybe not react. It's
Nice.
almost
Yeah,
like the
I
starting point.
100% agree with you. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like the starting point of a starting point of the possibility of our evolution is the strengthening of thought. So, for instance,
Nice.
if we have enough strength in our thought, we have the chance to direct our attention into the center. Then the spiritual world may appear from the outside, coming to us or pressing in to our consciousness or existence. I'm not
It's
sure
very
that makes
nice.
sense.
Yeah, it does. I
Yeah.
mean, I always say to people, and how nice it is that we do have a wonderful exemplar that lived, that we can look at the life that he lived, Rudolf Steiner, and we can see what it looks like when what you're describing is, let's say, at a pretty full capacity, and the kinds of uh, respondings that he can do rather than reactings in the world.
Yeah.
And get what we get. We get Waldorf education, we get biodynamic agriculture. And these, you know, he give one set of lectures and it becomes a worldwide movement in 50 years.
Hmm.
That's because everybody else can't do that yet, in a way, right? They
Yeah.
hear it, they see it, they react to it, I'm going to say, and they can't help it. This is so amazing. It's got to be realized more fully in the world. So, wow, would that be something if it was a whole world of Rudolf Steiner level people, as it were, right?
Yeah.
With their And as he argues, yes, every person would be freely acting out of their own freedom in every deed they did, but because of the nature of the clarity of their consciousness in relation to their thinking, and thinking is harmonious amongst all humanity, if
Yeah.
it's found at this level, that all these deeds will in fact create a magnificent harmony, like a
Yeah.
beehive, but now a beehive where each individual bee is completely self-aware and responding out of its own
Yeah.
freedom,
Hmm.
kind of
Um,
thing.
yeah, in excuse me. Historically, for myself, I always had a slight aversion to Rudolf Steiner's idea of almost like attempting to try and fix this place, this realm, this reality, this world, in terms of the efforts that he made to create establishments and education,
Interesting. Huh.
food, diet. He pretty much covered life in general, yeah. Um, I, I almost had almost like a Gnostic approach in terms of that this reality's failed, it's doomed, it can't be fixed, so therefore there's no point in trying. It's only within the last year or so that I'm starting to realize what Rudolf Steiner was trying to do. Maybe he wasn't trying to fix his place, but maybe trying to fix this place is part of the evolution process. In terms of when I say try to fix this place, trying to create a utopia. Can this place ever be a utopia? Is the big question. And like I say, I kind of had an aversion because I kind of looked at Rudolf Steiner as though he's trying to create a utopia. It's clearly not possible. And like I say, over the last year or so, I'm only starting to realize that, like what you said about the doctor, um, knowing that somebody's going to die, you should still try to, you shouldn't just give up. So let's say, for instance, this is a fallen world that we're living in. It can't be fully redeemed. It can't be a utopia. That doesn't mean to say that we shouldn't try, because it's in the trying that the work or the evolution will take place. Hope that made sense.
It does, I guess because of Steiner, I got that latter picture that you're sharing, uh, and it gave me a lot of. I know I don't think you could say that Steiner ever thought about utopia. That really was never an idea for him.
Yeah.
Uh, when he talks about the threefold social order, do you know about that? Did we ever talk about that much?
No, we haven't covered that.
Okay,
That'd be
so
good.
he just
Cover.
talks about, well, if you look properly at nation states or whatever, and he wasn't even he didn't really even like nation states kind of all that much, right?
Mm.
But you see that there really is a spiritual cultural sphere that needs to have its own autonomy and be run by its own experts. And we have a political cultural sphere that again needs its own autonomy and run by its own experts. And then we have an economic sphere that the same has to occur. And they need to consciously liaise between themselves.
Yeah.
And one can't overpower the other one.
Hmm.
Now you go, well, that's just a theory. Well, not when you think about it for a while. It makes a heck because it's the human being. If any one part of our thinking life or our feeling life or our willing life overpowers the other ones,
Yeah.
that's illness.
Yeah.
But when I say I'm not ill, does that mean I live in a utopia? No, it means I live in a healthy condition.
Sure.
So let's call it that. Can we make the world healthier?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Can we bring healing forces to disease? And that's the Christ. The Christ is the health bringing power
Yeah.
there's a phrase called the health bringing power of the Christ, right?
Hmm.
Salvation, the word for salvation and health is unfortunately the same word. So it's fascinating in that we've moved to the word salvation, and in the Christian community, which Steiner helped develop, they use the word health giving, health thing.
Okay. Yeah.
So the problem is of course the spiritual cultural life isn't regarded as a real thing. So
Yeah.
it's very hard to get that independent at all. And what we have is either the economic life completely overpowering the political sphere,
Yeah.
which is pretty much what we have in America,
Yeah.
or we have the intellectual life overpowering the political sphere, and you get probably communist Russia in a sad way. Though I have a lot of respect for what could have happened there. Let's
Sure.
say, right? So um, it's fun. It's actually fun to look at the dysfunctions of societies through the lens of the threefold social order Steiner talks about. It's really fascinating. Oh yeah, I could see there where the economic life's overpowering. Oh, here the political life is overpowering the economic, and nobody can feed
Yeah.
the people. All these kinds of things happening.
Hmm.
And he says because they have to be severely separated and then super consciously interact with each other. One fun one was that when you really analyze that, you realize, well, the economic sphere cannot set the wages for its workers. That's an inappropriate activity. That needs to be done by the experts in the political rights sphere. It sets the wages in the economic sphere.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, that's an unbelievably radical statement to say. But you know what I mean? But
Yeah.
Steiner wasn't radical, let's say. I love this stuff, man. You should read it. There's a book called The Threefold Social Order,
Yeah.
and he gave a bunch of lectures on it, a lot of lectures actually, uh, in 1919 because of the 1918 and 1919 because of the utter destruction of Europe. I
Yeah.
thought, okay, this is a good time. This is like a blessed time
Hmm.
for new health bringing ideas to possibly take root.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'll get on
I'll,
with that
I'll,
now.
I'll check that out. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, but again, so not utopia so much as just healthier.
Yeah.
Better food so that you remember he's driving in the car with Aaron Reed Pfeiffer after the agriculture course. And Pfeiffer says to him, Dr. Steiner, in the future, what will be the greatest hindrance for spiritual development in humanity? Do you know the answer to that? What he said?
No.
Nutrition.
Uh,
That our food will become less and less food and just look like the outer husks of something that isn't food anymore.
Yeah.
We will get no sustenance for it. And the cognitive life will just gradually fall into probably pure Ahrimanization, right?
Yeah.
Because if you're only feeding it minerals, it's only going to be an Ahrimanic being kind of thing. That's an amazing answer when you think about it.
Yeah. Yeah. Very.
And then we go back to what you were talking about, how the spiritual is in the physical, right? Kind
Yeah.
of in a way, that's shining through that response.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, think Rudolf Steiner was very prophetic in his lectures, especially what we see going on now. You know, over 100 years ago, he was able to predict a lot of things that have come to pass.
Yeah, a lot of technology, the merging with technology, I'll never get comfortable with that. But he talked about that just being,
Yeah,
it's simply going to happen. So
yeah,
you need to bring all your consciousness to bear on keeping that. I don't know what he means, but keeping it in some way balanced and not fall into it. I don't know. That's a rough one for me. You know, he was never easy, right? All wisdom is crystallized pain. Well, okay. You know, I guess I'm not going to get any fairy tale stories out of you, man. You know
yeah.
what I mean?
I mean, it's from for anybody that's on a spiritual journey, it's very easy to get into this idea that like technology is to be avoided, technology is bad,
Yeah,
to become a Luddite of some type. Um, whereas from what I can understand from Rudolf Steiner, is more a case of that it's inevitable. We have to go through it. It's a part of
yeah,
the evolutionary process. Uh, and this is where for myself at least, I try to work on my concentration. I try to strengthen my thinking. I try to be able to not immediately or automatically react to my mobile phone or any form of technology. I have to be able to accept that there is technology. I have to accept that I need to have an app for my online banking in my cashless world. But I'm also concentrated in that. I'm able to not so much separate myself from it, but not be a slave to it and not give not give myself away to it, not lose myself to it, not lose myself to technology. A very simple thing, like for instance, when my mobile phone rings, or if I get a notification or alert, I don't immediately rush to it, or I don't allow it to dictate my
yeah,
um,
yeah.
movement. I try to create a pause, maybe 3 seconds, and then I'll respond appropriately.
Nice. Yeah,
I say try to,
yeah,
it's
yeah, yeah.
always a difficult one. I try not to allow it to almost become like to dictate maybe it dictates my life, but it doesn't dictate my consciousness in that moment.
Yeah, so let's go back to like small children being exposed to screens and phones and iPads and stuff at a couple years old.
Yeah.
Interesting, huh? Because they have no reference point. They're not an I yet. They're not a self yet. They're still
Um,
incarnating into the body. It takes
mhm.
a actually quite a while. So in Waldorf schools, for instance, oh, this is just dogma. You guys are just into this crazy stuff. But it's all based on child development. You don't want them for tons of reasons, all the way to the physiologies growing in their eyes and stuff,
Yeah.
staring at screens
Yeah.
at all, right? Kind of thing. Fascinating, right? And this is part of that awareness of when these technologies can start to find a connection to the human being where uh, they won't, let's say, I don't want to say they won't do damage because I just can't help but think, no matter how old you are, we get the blessing of you and I talking all the way across half the world right
Exactly.
now.
Yes.
And I thought of it when I did the Rudolf Steiner audio. I thought, well, let's get some Steiner into this darkness and see if it helps to
Yeah.
bring consciousness to people. And oh yeah, technology, I got to watch out for this stuff, kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Through technology, it tells me this, right? Yeah. Watch out for us. Watch out for me. I'm here to grab you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, my journey from a young age, I think, feel and sense that it was definitely a Luciferic impulse. I have a tendency towards being quite Luciferian. In my school reports would always say could do well if he stopped staring out the window daydreaming. I was always a dreamer. I was always I was very visionary. in terms of how life could be or should be. Um, but over
So that's
time,
interesting that you're claiming there's an objective point of view that you weren't properly aligned with, and that's
yeah,
its own discussion.
yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
fair enough. But keep
yeah,
going. That keep going.
yeah.
Right?
I have
But you
a
would be you'd be loved in a Waldorf school, by the way. That's
yeah,
no problem at all. Okay. Well, I'm sure it
yeah.
can be. Okay. Sorry to
But
interrupt. Keep
when
going.
it came to arts and things like that, yeah, I could get stuck in. But but most of the other subjects, I would often stare out the window or daydream because I have a natural propensity to visualize. And over time, I've had to work with that. So, for instance, I went through a
Ah,
phase before I got into my Gurdjieffian studies that I was very much into outer body experiences. But my first teacher said to me, "You don't need to get out of your body, you need to get in your body. Your problem is that you're not in your body enough." And this is where
interesting.
I started to work with sensation, the sensation of the body, getting inside the body. And going back to what we were saying about the that symbol of the monad and my sort of interpretation of what Rudolf Steiner said about if you go so far in that you appear on the outside coming back in. Um, okay, so the point I'm trying to get to is for myself, my personal journey has been very kind of luciferic. I've had to work on sensation, coming back into the body, working on excuse me, concentration and balancing or harmonizing that luciferic impulse or habit um, with the intention of pulling myself into the body, pulling myself into sensation, pulling myself into the center of my being. And when that's balanced, one of the, I guess you could say, sort of, I don't know, spiritual radiation or something that I picked up was that I need to work with technology, not run
Hmm.
away from it. Hence why I do a lot of online stuff. I
Yeah.
don't reject technology, but I must always remind myself to be in balance with either using it or the importance of it. I don't forget life for the sake of technology.
Yeah. But your martial arts as well, wasn't that a big component of your coming into your body as well?
Yeah, well, yes and no.
Huh.
I saw some crazy experiences of like almost out of body. I had a few near-death experiences competing, but I always had this kind of
Wow.
out of body experience, or because a lot of it's fear-based. So when you're in fear, you can kind of go one direction or another. You either want to escape or you charge towards the threat. I always had this inclination to disappear, to evaporate. And
Ah,
if I'm honest, and I haven't told many people this, that majority of my martial arts career was some kind of attempt to get into my body and to feel the pain, to feel the blows of, yeah.
wow.
Because
Yeah, yeah.
as a child, I spent a lot of my time out of my body, like without sensation, without, um, I run the risk of being a mystic who can't pay the rent.
Right.
You've heard that saying, yeah?
Sure, sure.
Yeah. Um, yeah.
Well said, even. That's a good one, actually. I don't think I've ever heard that said that way. That's good.
Yeah. I think that implies a sort of luciferic impulse. Yeah.
Sure. Oh, yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think so.
Sit around
Yeah.
meditating and not engaging in life or the physical life.
I wonder if I'll ask this just in case you have an idea about it. You know, in Waldorf, they take what is otherwise sort of the dead objective factualization of things in the early years, and they try to bring it into uh, story form
Hmm.
and into rich, imaginative story form, and tell these stories that sort of encode, you know, let's say prosaic knowledge in them. Would that have been something that, even though you were daydreaming, if you'd start to hear these imaginative stories told to you, that your imagination would have, you know, grabbed hold of that and been very, you know, had an enriching experience from it?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
So
mean, I
that's
was,
interesting, right? Yeah.
yeah, it was almost like maybe it's the opposite way around. I could materialize. Okay, so my ordinary education, the teacher would often try to articulate or educate me in a way of physical facts and this da 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 da. I would often go off into some kind of daydreaming state. Um, I'd be listening to what they're saying, but I would reconstruct it in my imagination, then bring it back into myself.
Uh-huh.
So I'm very good at craft design technology. I'm very good at building things. I'm very good at engineering, but I didn't learn it like ordinarily in terms of
Wow,
directly
interesting.
to
Yeah.
the material of whatever it is you're engineering. Um,
Huh.
and okay, so I don't talk about me. I want to go back to Rudolf Steiner. One of the questions I get asked quite a bit about is how did Rudolf Steiner, how was he able to get this knowledge and understanding from higher worlds? And also to have such a broad scope of knowledge, understanding within one lifetime.
Yeah, that's something, isn't it?
Mm.
So two things. One is, of course, there were probably some significant reincarnations that helped to develop things, right?
Yeah.
In this incarnation, though, that he had, there was a fruition, some kind of convergence of a lot of impulses that were occurring in him. And what we're talking about in terms of a learning curve that he had and a comprehensiveness that he had, I think has to do, when we go back to this again, that we talked about the physical, etheric, astral, and I, and we need to realize, and even the higher bodies, we need to realize that every one of our bodies has its own organs of perception.
Sure.
All of them have organs of perception in them. The
Hmm.
ones we're using now are the ones in our ego and the ones in our physical organism.
Yeah.
And that's how we've built the world we built, sadly, in some ways, right? Because it's not a full picture. It's not a full
Yeah.
picture of what's there,
Hmm.
given the four bodies we have, right? So we get something that, as population has increased, especially, we're seeing the flaws, erupt in it pretty intensely.
Hmm.
So what happens if you can see the etheric world with the same clarity, because your thinking can work into that world and organize, relate, comprehend, everything there.
Yeah.
And what happens if the astral organs of perception are awakened and your thinking can enter into them and organize and relate and act? And now you have a phenomenological panorama
Yeah.
that is your natural modality of seeing.
Yeah.
And it ain't mine, right? So then, and again, this is kind of mechanical because we want to communicate this to people. So then you can see the soul life of another human being. You can
Yeah.
see, the life of animals, which is cosmic. Animals are cosmic beings, right? Their
Yeah.
group soul is something that's far beyond us, except they have, I'm going to argue, they don't have the kind of individuality we have.
Sure.
So that's a shortcoming on the physical plane. But when it comes to knowing things, many things they know we do not know,
Yeah.
partly because of their senses. Okay. So the other thing then becomes is, well, when you have these organs of perception, the earth becomes the living being that it is. We have the idea of it. We want to say it's true. We hope it's true. We argue certain processes show it's alive, but it doesn't affect our will. We don't see it alive. Not really. It's just a big lump, and there's some stuff growing on the top of it, And and if we did see it as real as a rock hitting a thing, and if a hammer's coming at you, that perception results in an act of will,
Yeah.
right? You move out of the way,
Yeah.
right? And that should be what's happening right now with our ecology and everything. If we had direct perception of what was going on around us, we would get out of the way with the same casual, absolute common sense
Yeah.
that you do when a hammer's coming at you. And we would solve all of our ecological problems right away.
Yeah.
It would be easy, but we don't believe it's real. We know
Yeah.
it is. We know it is, but it isn't all the way into the body. Why? Because we don't have the perceptions for it, the
Yeah.
real perceptions that the astral world would give us, the etheric world would give us, right?
Yeah.
So then, once we see that living world and we can completely unite with it, as Steiner was able to do, we have its memories as well.
Okay. Yeah.
And those are called the Akashic Chronicle, right? The Akashic Record
Yeah.
are these memories the earth has. And the earth is the human being's excrescence. The entire earth is something that, in order for us to find the right form and function for the ego to live isolated and separated from the spiritual world in,
Yeah.
that's what we did on purpose, you might say.
Hmm.
We talked about it before. How can we really be free unless the possibility of us not saving, not being saved is there, right?
Yeah.
That has to be there, right?
Yeah.
So, so all the memories, all the lifetimes of all the human beings that have ever lived have an echo. And when I say echo, it's a very bad word. Have an after image, have a
Yeah.
presence in this world, and Steiner could communicate with who he needed to communicate with. Now, many mediums are able to access that, but they're not awake. And because they're not awake, they don't have the ego directing them to where they need to go.
Yeah.
Steiner, arguably, we're going to say, had that. So he could, when he wanted to learn something, he could do it systematically because as an awake clairvoyant,
Yeah.
he could access all the physicists he needed to access, or all the artists, or all the orators, or all the
Yeah.
philosophers, or all the poets, right? Or all the educators, or all the agriculturalists.
Hmm.
See that? So to me, once you have that phenomenological panorama, you have a different kind of learning curve.
Yeah.
And when you speak, there's an authority there
Yeah.
that is I can't duplicate. I don't know what it sounds like, but a lot of people were PhDs in their own fields. And when they heard Steiner speak, they knew they were listening to an authority way beyond any academic teacher they'd ever
Yeah.
had. Yeah.
So
And they were moved by that.
so
Is
maybe,
that what do you think? Is that an answer?
yeah. Yeah. And I think
Okay.
it's linked to what we was talking about this ability to strengthen thought and to have a level of concentration where the I or the ego can direct its attention in order to and aim. Because on a day-to-day basis, we kind of have these kind of mild aims that we have to do, but inevitably we get distracted or redirected or deflected into something else, and then whereas and that's just on a sort of day-to-day practical level, but on a spiritual level, if you can have enough concentration and strength of thought without deflection, without distraction, without redirection, then there's a lot more possibilities. There's a lot more there available to remember and to bring back. So, like for instance, when we go to sleep, we have these dreams. We may go in some kind of lower or astral worlds or realms, but by the time we come back, it was so vague and mild that we don't remember anything that's actually useful for us consciously. Whereas if we could go into our sleep with enough concentration, with enough strength of thought, then we might actually be able to do something useful in wherever it is that we go.
Yeah. Or we could make that dream state, shall we say, in the continuity of consciousness and knowledge of higher worlds, right?
Yeah,
That dream state can become actually an operable dimension
yeah,
of our wide awake consciousness.
yeah,
So that's kind of what we're doing. I mean,
yeah,
you could call the clairvoyance a kind of wide awake dreaming, right? That's
yeah,
lucid dreaming or whatever the words are. You could use that phrase too. Steiner, really was always cautious about people becoming enamored of this unusual consciousness state
yeah,
that we call dreaming
yeah.
because it has an atavistic component to it, right? We
Hmm.
can fall into it and go back into forms of spiritual growth that he argues aren't appropriate anymore.
Yeah,
It's just a danger, right? And
yeah.
again, why? Well, do this because it's 10 times harder. No, this is easy. If I get into a dream thing, man, I can my way to here or what. And
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
not dismissing what you're saying, right?
yeah,
But it's that danger, and it's what mediums are. We love channeling now,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
We love mediums and channeling. He goes, yes, that was a normal way that we would experience the spiritual world thousands of years ago, and you want to keep it here. Yes, well, there are people. Edgar Casey is pretty awesome, okay, to me to
yeah,
this day. So there are certain protected individuals
yeah,
whose manifestation of a, shall we say, atavistic form of consciousness just are a blessing to humanity. If we don't get caught up and say, There are people, there are places where Edgar Casey where they just have a whole bunch of people in a beds and they're trying to get them to have this unconscious form of clairvoyance. And that's to me a scary thing. It is for me. Geez, we maybe we're so desperate we're going to need it in the future because we can't break through
Yeah.
in the moral, correct, true way that we should, let's
Yeah.
say, right? But you see where they go with that. Oh, Edgar Casey does it that way. That's the way we should all do it. That's the danger there for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we have to be careful what we wish for sometimes. And I do think, feel, and sense that there are safety mechanisms built into this reality with connection to consciousness to prevent us
Ah,
from just being able to go all over the place. Because, the level of our being, or should I say, the level of our ability to perceive has to be matched by a certain level of being and um, morality.
well said. Well said. Yeah. What
Yeah.
does he say? For every step in spiritual development, you must needs take 3 steps in moral development,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? Because of the temptations. We got so many guys, they're not charlatans. They're magnificent, powerful, developed beings that just were unbalanced.
Yeah.
Sad to say. I
Yeah.
mean, it's the fruits of their deeds are the proof of that. Yeah.
I mean,
So
to draw
go ahead.
to draw some kind of mundane parallel, you could draw similar equivalents with, say, money. If you used to give somebody
Ah,
50 million pounds, transfer it into their bank account, see how long it takes them to become either very um, low consciousness beings or just bad people. It can corrupt very quickly and easily. And the same with spiritual powers or the ability to have greater levels of perception than everybody else. If it's not backed up with, like you say, 3 extra steps of morality, then
yeah.
it's always a temptation.
It must be a temptation, Lee, that you and I can't even imagine.
Hmm.
We can talk about temptation, but well, it's like rock stars, right?
Yeah.
With women and people, drugs throwing themselves at them, and it's like there's a great scene where Dylan's talking. He's got an old friend in Minneapolis, and who's in a wheelchair, and they're walking along. It's in the middle of the night, or not in the middle of the night, let's say late in the day, and they come upon a bar, and it's got real high windows, way up high, so you have to kind of go up, and they can hear a lot of revelry
Yeah.
and a couple of people are with him that he's known since he was a kid. This is when he's probably like 35. And they're going, wow, there's people, they're having a great time in there, he says. That looks like a really great time. And Dylan looks at the guy and goes, not when I walk in the door.
Um,
Everybody will shut down,
yeah.
stop doing what they're doing, turn and stare at him. Think
Yeah.
about that. That's
Yeah.
insane.
Yeah.
But they got to deal with it all day long. How do you maintain any kind of a normal ego, in a
Yeah.
certain sense, right? Yeah. I hope that's an apropos example, but fame. And I think now of riches as a mental illness that we don't regard as truly pathological. We
Yeah.
don't see it as pathological. So people that were enough is never enough, we
Hmm.
admire.
Uh,
In fact, I think we even deify them to some extent now. I think we think of them as demigods if
yeah.
they've got billions of dollars. They're not people, they're kind of godlike now.
Yeah.
And that's that darkness of Ahriman there. That's a beautiful picture of Ahriman right there to me. I'm not picking on any one of them at all, but just that our orientation toward them has this Ahrimanic worship.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, we always have to
Well,
be careful what we wish for.
this is an apropos kind of thing to bring in here, and that is this idea of the 4 sacrifices of Christ.
Okay.
So it's a little long though, but let's try this. So there was a time in the evolution of humanity when we couldn't incarnate on the earth anymore. That every time we incarnated and use that word or incorporated into earth substance, that substance would be used in such a way by our incorporation that the next time we came back, we couldn't use it. It was too hard. We'd done something to it where it calcified.
Yeah.
And over time, we did this to the entire earth. The whole earth was calcified.
Yeah.
And human beings were on the other planets waiting, you might say, to try to incarnate, and they couldn't do it. So the earth was desolate.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hmm.
And so the higher beings realized that this was inhibiting evolution. And so they then began to draw out this calcified substance from the earth, which became the moon.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
Hmm.
during the time that was happening, let's say this to dramatize it, the very first and strongest human being that could start to take up substance on the earth as the moon was being extricated, which was a male female being, right? We call him Adam, right?
Okay.
And
Yeah.
this being, let's say this, and the higher world saw the amazing etheric forces of this being. This was an astonishing feat for
Hmm.
it to be the first one when, let's say, the processes weren't complete yet or something, because we
Yeah.
always had the desire to keep our evolution going, right?
Hmm.
So they then went in and they took part of these forces and kept them back in the spiritual world. So these forces in the spiritual never incarnated through all the rest of time. This happened in the middle of Lemuria when this
Yeah.
occurred, right?
Hmm.
And the moon extricated. And so these forces stayed in the spiritual world. So as time goes on, and Steiner, so there was a time when our organs of perception, our physical organs of perception, started to become selfish.
Hmm.
And instead of my eyes being used objectively, that I don't know my eyes are doing what my eyes are doing. I know what my eyes give me. That's what I know,
Yeah.
right? I don't know the eyes doing anything really, right? He
Yeah.
said, but he says what was happening is the eye was beginning to, like when it would see blue, it would feel this suction in the eyes. You wouldn't see the blue. You'd feel the suction in your eyes. You'd see red. You wouldn't see the red. You'd feel the stabbing of that, right? So all your organs started to become selfish.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
what happens? So Steiner describes with the Christ being who is always spiritually present, the Christ being incorporated itself in these special life forces. These were human life forces, right? This Adam that they kept back, he incorporated himself in them. He didn't incarnate in them. That's he uses the word ensouled. He
Yeah.
ensouled them, and they were able then to radiate healing forces into humanity and balance our sense organs. And this was a massive. This was a great deed, right? Interesting, right? That
Yeah.
happened in the about the latter third, I think, of the Lemurian epoch.
Yeah.
And then in the first part of the Atlantis epoch, this happened to our vital organs, our seven vital organs, right? They started to become selfish.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Now, when we get ill, our organs become selfish. When I have lung problems, my lungs they take over and become independent of my body.
Yeah.
Right? Illness, that's what we call illness now. But this
Yeah.
was becoming a general condition. Again, Steiner says that the Christ being ensouled itself in these special etheric forces, and they radiated healing influence throughout humanity and brought those to harmony.
Yeah.
Then in the latter part of Atlantis, this happened to our thinking and our feeling and our willing. Our soul forces started to separate from each other. My
Yeah.
will may have wanted to do one thing, but my thinking was going to do something else, and my feeling was going to do something else.
Yeah.
And we would just be buffeted by everything around us. Again, this ensoulment occurs, these forces occur. Okay. So
Yeah.
then this is the fun part for this whole story. The fourth time occurs. Well, the fourth time, what happens is that these etheric forces that have stayed out of incarnation all this time finally incarnate in a physical human body for
Uh,
the first time.
yeah.
And that is the etheric body
Yeah.
of the Jesus child in the Luke gospel. So the child that's born in the Luke gospel
Yeah.
has the etheric forces of Adam,
Okay. Yeah.
as the etheric forces of the body of Adam.
Yeah.
Now, again, Adam was male and female. So this is, shall we even say the male forces, because it's complicated, but your etheric body's feminine,
Yeah.
your astral body's both male and female, and your
Yeah.
ego is neither one. Okay, this is a picture of
Sure.
those bodies.
Yeah.
So, so then that had to happen because any other etheric body of a human being, as it would bring it in, was corrupted by karma. There was no way that Christ, when it finally incarnated in the body of the Jesus of Nazareth to come,
Yeah.
right, would have been able to have a body suitable for its incarnation. It would have just shattered it. Just it would have died within hours or minutes or seconds or whatever. So
Yeah.
all these bodies, the physical, the etheric, and astral, right, had to be prepared in the purest way possible so that they could withstand the presence of the incarnation of the Christ at the baptism for long enough for the Christ to transform them into what the astral body became, which was the first Easter, and what
Yeah.
the etheric body was to the second Easter, to what the third right body was in the mystery of Golgotha itself, which was the third Easter.
Yeah.
Right, there were three Easters there. You heard this story before?
Yes, in parts, yeah. But
Okay,
it's
okay,
not been explained like this. Yeah.
yeah, and also that child's
Fascinating.
astral body was very special because it was the spiritualized, purified body of the Buddha, the Nirmanakaya.
Yeah.
So again, why? Well, because these bodies were going to be prepared for this future time, right? When the Christ could incarnate in them, which was a amazingly complicated, shall we say, spiritual thing. And then on the other side of it, so that's what we would call the descending aspect of Christology.
Yeah.
That from the higher worlds, these things had to be brought about on the earth. But
Hmm.
on the other hand, there was also an ascending aspect to Christology. And that was what? That was through earthly experience and through reincarnations.
Yeah.
A human individuality would reach the highest possible stage of initiation.
Hmm. Yeah.
Interesting, huh?
Yeah.
That there's a
Yeah.
descending
Beautiful.
and an ascending, and that's Zarathustra.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
The Zarathustra was the ascending initiate
Yeah.
who could reach such a level, imagine this, Lee, could reach such a level of development that when the time came and it was Jesus of Nazareth, especially when it was Jesus of Nazareth with all these sublime bodies, for heaven's
Yeah.
sake, that it would go, I have the wherewithal in my development to surrender them and leave them for the Christ to inhabit them
Uh-huh.
at
Yeah.
the baptism.
Yeah.
Is there a more beautiful Christ story on the face of the earth? I'm sorry, man. That is just drop dead gorgeous. I'm sorry, people, for all the details that have to be kind of absorbed in
Yeah.
that, right? And
Yeah.
that event where that Zarathustra ego found its way to these three bodies is told in a story in
Mhm.
the Bible, right? And that's
Yeah.
the time in the temple when they lose Jesus. The family's on their way home and they goes, "Where's Jesus?" And they go back to the temple and they find him teaching in the temple as though he's a wise man. And Steiner says that's when the
Yeah.
ego of Zarathustra left its body, which was a different Jesus child born in the Matthew gospel. He was born in a house. Matthew was born in a manger. The
Yeah.
Magi came to Zarathustra, which was the shining star. That's what that word means, shining star. And
Yeah.
the shepherds came. So there are two parallel stories, but of two different children, right?
Yeah.
Which
Yeah.
drives, of course, which to me answers a whole bunch of problems in the Bible. So then that
Yeah.
incarnation occurs. Then the ego can actually really work on this astrality. Plus, there was a layer of the astrality of this beautiful Luke child that separated. This Nirmanakaya was actually rejuvenated because that's the time when the child goes to puberty and their astral body unsheathes. And that unsheathing was this, what you could call super purified, even higher Nirmanakaya of Buddha, which then rejuvenated Buddhism,
Yeah.
Steiner says.
Yeah.
So you get 100 years later, you get the Mahayanic tradition,
Uh-huh.
which is no, we're not going to just escape the earth.
Yeah.
I'm going to hold back as a bodhisattva. I'm going to hold back my evolution.
Mhm.
That's actually kind of a Luciferic thing to do. I'm going
Yeah.
to hold it back. I'm not going to go forward. I'm going to reincarnate again, and I'm going to do this until even every blade of grass is liberated.
Yeah.
That's Christ. That's Christ in Buddhism.
Yeah.
Steiner would argue.
It's well,
Wild, huh?
yeah. I mean, as you're talking, I'm trying to maintain concentration and relaxation simultaneously so that my more of my organs of perception can absorb this kind of wild tapestry of information. It's yeah. I recommend
Yeah.
anybody that's watching this or will watch this uh, podcast that you take the time. to relax whilst in concentration and just try to allow your all of your organs of perception to absorb all of this information from this podcast.
Yeah, I hope I didn't, misspeak either. I'm pretty sure I'm pretty close on that. And I will mention too that this is
Amazing.
simply history.
Yeah,
This is just history, but it's history from someone who has this phenomenological panorama of perception of all their
yeah,
bodies being open. They're
yeah,
simply watching history in the way that you can spiritually do, right?
yeah, yeah,
Isn't that something? And you
yeah.
can't make it up in a certain sense, You can't invent it. You can only see it. But then
Yeah,
after he saw it, he went to the Bible and went, oh, that's what they're saying here.
yeah,
Interesting how they say that here.
yeah,
And sure, these are two complete, they're not even the same genealogy. When you get to Solomon, Solomon has two kids. One of them is Nathan. That's the Luke gospel. The other one is David, and that's the Matthew gospel. They're not even the same genealogies. And people go, no, no, that doesn't mean anything. It's the same kid. You're nuts,
yeah,
it does sound pretty insane. But of course, you're saying you believe in a man who died and was resurrected again, and that's not a problem. So we're already pretty nuts there anyway, right? So
yeah, yeah.
I would say
Okay.
if you could believe that, how could Steiner be more fantastical? I mean, that doesn't even make sense to me. The most
Yeah,
fantastical thing is that someone died and was resurrected, right?
yeah, yeah,
And I work with that story very seriously in my life.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So
Okay.
so
Yeah,
what's interesting too to tie into this is the dogma of materialism. So we have this idea that people will say, well, no, 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 just look back. You've got Osiris, there's the Christ story, and you've got Vishvakarman, there's the Christ story, and you've got Adonis and Adam, that's the Christ story, right? These
yeah,
are just somebody in the Hebrew tradition just decided to revive that whole thing and make their own version,
yeah,
right? That's the materialistic understanding of the situation.
yeah.
But then Jung comes along, and Steiner too, but Jung comes along, which is interesting.
Hmm.
And he says, no, we've discovered the collective unconscious.
Hmm.
And in the collective unconscious, there are these archetypes that live in the commonality of all humanity. I guess it must be genetic or cellular or whatever,
Yeah.
but they have a motive power. They have a power to move the will of all of humanity.
Hmm.
And they constantly push up and emerge over and over again.
Yeah.
And if you tie that in with Steiner's evolution of consciousness, each modality of consciousness is going to have the experience of these archetypes in such a way that it's going to manifest a spiritual world. It's going to manifest a religion,
Hmm.
whatever, right?
Yeah.
But Steiner's saying these are all because Christ is spiritually present in the earth, and the clairvoyance of those times and the clairvoyance of those times was seeing what it was seeing. And a certain modality of consciousness manifested a religion that was absolutely accurate,
Hmm.
absolutely true, and absolutely correct. But then consciousness continues to evolve,
Yeah.
and that becomes encased in tradition and books and
Yeah.
institutions and dogma.
Yeah.
And now a new one arises.
Hmm.
Same thing happens. Consciousness keeps evolving, isn't it? So the culprit here in causing all these problems in the world aren't the religions. It's the inevitable, implacable evolution of consciousness,
Yeah.
constantly changing
Yeah.
the experience of the spirit. For isn't that something?
Yeah. Yeah.
So even now, science once is religionizing, right? Even science is kind of becoming a religion,
Yeah.
in its own way.
Yeah. It's
So
like the dogma. It becomes dogmatic and
yeah,
almost
because
like
you
that.
can't see anymore. There's no direct knowing anymore. So
Yeah.
we all fall into belief. We fall into rigidity, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. So then you got the shell. There's only the sort of the empty shell, and then you have to form some kind of belief to inhabit.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And then you get really, really mad when somebody disagrees with you. And I
Yeah.
always go, how come when you get to the least knowledge-based aspect of your religion is when you get the most belligerent that somebody doesn't agree with you, because you
Yeah.
don't know anymore. You only believe. Why does people like belief? What is it with this belief thing? Now, I don't know anything, but I hardly believe in anything either. I'm waiting for knowledge. I'm waiting for
Yeah.
somehow my organs of perception to
Mhm.
awaken and I can begin to see and know directly. So when the hammer comes at me, I'm going to get out of the way. Or when
Okay.
I see someone in need,
Yeah.
I won't only just help them with food in their mouth, possibly, but I'll help them with some profound knowing through seeing their karma,
Mm.
and knowing you need this
Yeah.
and it will make a difference. There's even a time, get this now, Steiner says in one of these lectures, he said, there'll come a time in humanity's evolution, maybe this in Jupiter condition or something, when our Christ love will be so profound that when we see somebody in need, there will be times when we'll actually exchange our etheric body for their etheric body. Now that's love, man.
Yeah.
I mean, that just kind of sets you back in your chair, the responsibility, and knowing when we were talking about studying and knowing, when I was about 25, one day I thought, well, what could happen if I could take this tiny pathetic capacity of love that I have now, and I really want to be greater, but what could happen if I could truly, in my consciousness, take over and command my ability to love, so that if I wanted to study biochemistry, I could love it 100% of my being
Yeah.
with no reserve of any kind. I would know that biochemistry perhaps in a day
Hmm.
or a month, anything. If I had love and I had love in that way, we have another way that we could see Steiner's learning curve.
Hmm.
Did he have that kind of love? And there's wonderful, wonderful stories of him in terms of love, but they're all so practical that you
Yeah.
don't see any flowering ooh-ahing going on. You know what I mean?
Mm.
And then, well, the other thing is people, one of the reasons they'd say that he probably died early was because uh, when he would go anywhere and people found out he was going to be there, they would make appointments to see him for 5, 10, 15 minutes, whatever they could get. And there would be, after a lecture, there would be lines of this that
Yeah.
would keep him up till 4 or 5 in the morning. And he would never turn anyone away.
Okay.
And so they would wait their turn. And people said, you
Hmm.
knew that he was speaking to your angelic being, that your guiding being, or something about you. And then
Yeah.
and they just had astonishing. That's pure love. That's all we're talking about. It doesn't look like much, does it? And Marie Steiner pleaded with people because Steiner would never say anything.
Yeah.
Pleaded with you are. We need to help him conserve his strength. We're shortening his life, and it didn't matter. They still came anyway. Isn't that
Well,
fascinating?
a candle that burns bright burns twice as
Yes.
quick. Yeah.
We've had
Twice as
this
bright, twice as
conversation
quick.
because you used that wonderful analogy before as well. Yeah.
Ah.
Yeah. Yeah. But
Excellent.
anyway, these are things that, you don't know because he was, was also an academically intense German. You know what I mean? It was all
Hmm.
pretty, really, Austrian though, but, just that
Yeah.
mind that,
Yeah.
had to,
Uh, how is your German coming along?
nah. I had a couple of years in college. I took, I've always wanted to learn it. I have Pimsleur's I walk with. And as
Oh,
I'm getting older, I'm almost 70 now. I'm losing it faster than I'm gaining it. I need to just
oh.
live there. You know what I mean? I don't think there's any way. I don't even know if that would help anymore. And I watch German shows and I try not to read the subtitles. And no, what? You say that way? It's all the idioms, all the idioms. How about you? Do you know German?
No, no.
I imagine you're Ukrainian or your Russian is pretty good though.
Uh, I can understand words, but I can't pronounce it. So
Okay. Okay.
when
Cool. Yeah.
when my wife's talking to family on the phone, or um, I can understand some of the words, yeah, and the sentiment.
Yeah.
I mean,
My mother spoke Ukrainian until she was only 7, so she didn't even learn English on the farm until she was 7 years old.
yeah. In terms of pronunciation, I mean, even with German, I really struggle to pronounce it. Um, and the English language is kind of related to German. It has a heavy Germanic influence, but for
I suppose that's right. Yeah.
the
Yeah.
pronunciation, I really struggle with. I was going to try to use some German tonight, but I didn't have enough time to prepare. I don't want to
Uh,
humiliate myself. Oh, actually,
well, I was told that my pronunciation was okay, but if I don't understand what I'm saying, who cares?
uh, my wife's in the background. I'm not sure.
Ja, ja,
Can you say it?
Geisteswissenschaft.
You have to come a bit closer.
Geisteswissenschaft. Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
we learned.
Spiritual science.
Yeah. Ah,
Spiritual.
Spiritual science.
yeah. Dale
Yeah,
got, Dale got it.
Geisteswissen.
yeah, Geisteswissenschaft. It's easier for Russian to pronounce it, actually.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but we have complicated words as well.
Mm.
Oh, yes, you do. You have
Yeah.
complicated letters like sh. You have one letter that says sh. I'm
Yeah.
like, what?
Yeah, the combination of letters, yeah, it's
I
very
love that.
weird.
No, I do. I do. I love the language a lot. I love Russian. I know Ukrainian is completely different, but I just do. I don't know why. I just always been.
Yeah.
There's something so soulful coming out of somebody with that language. It just blows me away. You know.
I
Well,
do not know Ukrainian too much, but I do understand a lot of Ukrainian because it's connected to Russian. Yeah.
Oh, you think so? Okay. My mother said a friend of ours was Russian, and I had her on the phone, and my mom still understands Ukrainian, but she can't
Yes.
speak it anymore.
Yeah.
And I don't understand what they're saying. So she was like 80, so she didn't have a lot of patience maybe to listen to it.
well,
I mean, they have the same alphabet. So I don't.
I'm not sure if I mentioned this to you before, Dale, but when I think I was about 12. Um, in England, we learn French. It's pretty much
Nice.
compulsory that we learn French. For some reason, I had a real aversion to learning French. So I would really look out the window in the French lesson. I had absolutely no interest in learning French. The teacher decided to send me home. So I went home and my mother said, well, what's going on? And I said, I don't learn French. She said to me, what language do you want to learn then? I said, Russian. Now, my poor mother, back then you couldn't go online. She had to go into the town and she brought me this Russian dictionary. She brought it back
Oh, wow.
and she goes, there you go. You can learn Russian. And I started to look at it and, I, the letters are completely different. It's not like learning Spanish or Italian where the letters are the same, at least. But the reason why I'm mentioning this is I had no reason to say Russian. And how would I have known many years later that I would have gone to Russia and then married a Russian lady?
Yeah, yeah.
There must have been some memory, some kind of remembering the future. I kind of regret that I never actually took up Russian when I was 12 because had I been fluent, it would have been a lot easier now.
There's that wonderful picture Steiner gives of what he call, karma. We normally think of karma, but he says, well, if we look more closely at karma, we realize there's two kinds of karma.
Hmm.
There's moon karma and sun karma.
Hmm.
You heard this before?
Yeah, 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 yeah,
Yeah. So moon karma takes you from where you are and brings you to the meetings with others that you need to have.
hmm.
So that could have very much have been a karmic thing where the Russian was just an echo of what you were going to meet in the future.
Hmm.
And then once you meet somebody, then the question of what's going to happen after that becomes a question of sun karma.
Hmm.
That you are going to make new karma now, right? Kind of thing. So I've always found that fascinating.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm quite. We haven't got time to go into it now, but I'm big into the idea of eternal recurrence,
Right.
where we keep repeating. Like I said, I don't have time to go into it too much, but we keep repeating the cycles of our own existence. So, for instance, we could have reincarnation where we incarnate as different people in different places. Then there reaches a point where that's no longer necessary. What is necessary is that we repeat the same life. It's almost like a concentration of reincarnation. Then we reach a point where we start just repeating the same life. And this is where we have the sort of deja vu. We have maybe one day is different to the next, but the interior of the event carries the same thing, same pattern. So, for instance, if I've got a particular area of evolution I need to work on, I may meet different people, but it will make contact with that same point that needs evolution.
Okay.
So I could go to one country and have a problem with a particular person. I run away, go to another country, and then, as if by magic, the same person or different person, but who has the same thing about them that either irritates me or causes a problem to me. So the outer form may be different, but the inner um, repetition is the same. Whenever you talk about eternal recurrence, straight away people will say, well, but today's going to be tomorrow because tomorrow I'm going to be in London and today I was so and so. Yeah, the outer form might be different, the outer event might be different, but the internal workings is the same. It repeats. It's a
So
yeah,
do you see there being, once you're in that repetition, that recurrence condition, is there still evolution occurring?
yes,
Okay,
yeah,
interesting then. Okay. I
yeah,
would sense in a way a conflict there to if I'm still evolving, how can it be a recurrence unless a recurrence is the aspect simply called reincarnation that's still happening. So that's, you know what I
yeah,
mean? I see those two things needing
yeah,
clarification in a way.
yeah. So, for instance, it's almost like a refined version of reincarnation. So, when we reincarnate, we get to experience all kinds of things about parts of ourselves. Once that sort of concentrates, we then almost like the finishing, polishing of our existence. So, for instance, if you went to school on Monday and you totally forgot everything, when you go to school on Tuesday and you don't remember anything, you didn't learn anything. So, when we concentrate into one life of repetition, it gives us a possibility to at least remember what it is we're trying to learn and self-perfect. And then once we have perfected it to a reasonable level, we can then move on to something else. Um, I was going to say that one of the problems with the idea of eternal recurrence, and bearing in mind it's only a thought experiment,
Okay, all right.
um, is like the film like Groundhog Day, where it's repetition, 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 literal repetition of the inner and outer. What I'm referring more to is the repetition of our sort of inner world that can be in different external environments. So we have the habits that need to be refined and perfected. And so what I'm trying to say is the outer world can only change once the inner world has adapted, evolved, perfected.
Interesting. Okay. I could imagine it also being dialogic, though, that the outer world is in dialogue with our inner world.
Yeah,
And so we're given very different conditions for scientists usually don't reincarnate again until the world has become sufficiently different
yeah.
for it to be worth your while,
Yeah,
shall we say.
yeah,
Is that side. The other thing that's interesting is imagine this other aspect that your etheric body is remembering every single thing you experience throughout your life, even if you consciously haven't had the ability to access that etheric body much. We have our ability to remember, but it's just a shadow of what's there.
hmm
And so that when you pass away and your etheric body is freed from replacing those 330 billion cells a day in your physical organism,
yeah,
these enormous forces with all your pure memories turn and pour this memory life into your soul. That's part of the excarnation. It takes about 3 1/3 days for that to happen. So
yeah,
that's why you usually have wakes and those special quiet moments for that time to occur.
yeah,
So all of it's there. All of those memories are there, right?
yeah,
Isn't that interesting? So your
yeah,
life passes before your eyes,
yeah,
which we think is a unique idea in special circumstances. And those circumstances just indicate something that happens to every single person when they die, right?
yeah,
From
yeah.
Steiner's point of view.
hmm
Now that has that learning experience you're talking about too, in terms of karma,
hmm
in terms of growth, that, oh, that's the life I lived,
hmm
however much conscious I was of it, right?
Yeah,
In
yeah.
a certain way, right?
hmm
So anyway, I'll throw that out because there's a lot in there. I'm not disagreeing at the same
Yeah.
time that I think karma takes care of everything you're saying. Reincarnation
hmm
takes care of everything you're saying there. Really,
Yeah.
it seems to me.
Yeah, the
So
whole
the
subject.
is it a Nietzschean eternal recurrence, or did Gurdjieff talk about eternal recurrence
Um,
as well?
well, it was Ouspensky that was big
So he
into,
talks about it. Okay,
yeah, but and
but he,
he used to pester Gurdjieff for answers, and Gurdjieff says more or less you're closer than you think, but it's not correct.
yeah,
You're closer than you realize. With regards to Nietzsche, He was more like thought experiment, and maybe there isn't the possibility in his model that you could actually evolve. Whereas Ouspensky, he was more
Yes, I think so.
inclined to have evolution factored into it. But I think it's the mere shock. The idea is it's the shock of the realization that you're going to repeat your life that gives you the impetus to actually change, to do something to change, and to start paying
I see.
attention to the repetition.
Well, that's interesting. Okay.
Yeah,
I never
yeah,
thought of it that way. That's good. That's good.
yeah. It's a kind of I kind of merge it with other things. So, for instance, I I have and it's my theory, it's my idea that somewhere in the cosmos we've already reached our evolution. It's already happened, and we're almost kind of having to travel. Or should I say, for instance, we could be in some type of purgatory where this is it. This is the purgatory. Being aware of the things that we know we should do but can't do it. Um, and almost as though like we could be actually living in our own afterlife, but we just haven't realized it.
Hmm.
It's a bit far out, I know, but I tend to get almost nudges or inclinations towards we've already somewhere in the cosmos we've already reached our evolution, if that's possible. We just can't remember it because we're locked into this kind of time idea of time.
It's fascinating because, to me, the minute you say that, I go, yes, it has been completed.
Mm.
And that is the being of Christ. Christ Jesus is
Okay.
the
Yeah.
fullness of the human nature.
Yeah,
So,
that's it. Yeah,
we
the
get,
fullness.
so,
Yeah.
so here's this picture you were talking about before about if I could go to that center, I would experience this periphery, right? When we die, the first step after the 3 days is that we go into Kamaloka, Steiner says, and we're as large as the sphere of the moon with the earth at the center and the moon as a boundary for a sphere around the earth.
Yeah.
And we live in that. And the dead live there and the angelic realm lives there.
Yeah.
And we become a being of the periphery, not a being of the center,
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
which is what an initiation is literally having those experiences while you're alive.
Yes.
You have essentially you're experienced the whole life. So then you go through the spheres and you
Hmm.
get all the way out to Saturn. Now
Hmm.
most of us are asleep by then because we're probably asleep earlier. And then
Yeah.
we have what Steiner called the midnight hour of existence experience.
Hmm.
So you've spent kind of all your expansion forces, and there comes this moment where you're about to contract or not. And he says at that moment you're sort of given a decision.
Hmm.
You turn to Lucifer, and Lucifer says, "You're done. You're complete. You can stay with me here.
Hmm.
You don't have to reincarnate again.
Hmm.
You are complete."
Yeah.
And Steiner says, and in a certain way, you would be complete in Lucifer's realm, except that you would be a spiritual cripple
Mm.
if you were to compare it to the being of Christ standing before you, saying, "This is the fullness of the human being. Do you wish to strive for this?
Hmm.
Right? Do you wish to reach the fullness of what you can?" Where after the baptism, the ego of the Christ enters into the astrality, enters into the astral body
Hmm.
of a human being that he now is, right?
Yeah.
God and man together. I love the way Steiner just erases that problem and then begins to transform it until the walking on the water story in the Bible, where Peter sees Christ walking on water and jumps out of the boat thinking he's going to do it too. So I says that's a picture of where the Christ had brought the human astrality, the human astral body, all the way to the end of evolution.
Yeah.
And it had become a spirit self being.
Hmm.
Okay, completely purified, completely ennobled, completely eternal.
Yeah.
No reincarnation needed. Okay. Then
Hmm.
he went into the etheric body, and that at Mount Tabor, where Christ is standing clothed in white with Moses and Elijah by him, is where the Christ completes the complete transformation of the etheric body all the way to life spirit, to the end of human evolution.
Hmm.
And then finally, the mystery of Golgotha itself is where he transforms even the physical force body of the organism into something pure and eternal. So this is, right, from the point of view of anthroposophy,
Yeah.
the picture you're talking about.
Yeah.
And we already are it. You're
Yeah.
absolutely right on the money, right? That's time and space, right?
Yeah.
But we are, it's not owned. We may have the thought of it, right?
Yeah.
And that's the danger of anthroposophy in some cases, right?
Hmm.
I got the thought, so I must have it. Well, no, now you got to go to work.
Yeah.
Now you got to actually get out of the way of the hammer, man. A lot of times, a lot of ways, and you've got karma to work through.
Yeah.
And what a magnificent thing that you might call it, that baggage of evil that we have, that brings us to these moments you're talking about, that eternal recurrence. You're having those every day. You're having those every moment you wake up, in
Yeah.
my opinion, right?
Yeah.
I need to grow through and with and beyond the karma I am in, right? And it's all good. So, for instance, all those in that Kamaloka period, I didn't distinguish it. I think we have mentioned it before. You go through your life again from the moment you die till the moment you're born,
Hmm.
backwards.
Yeah.
And it's the amount of time you slept while you had been alive. So if you died at 60 years old, you laid in a bed for 20 years.
Yeah.
So those 20 years, you live in this Kamaloka, and instead of having the experience of slapping someone and feeling so powerful and superior,
Hmm.
you viscerally
Yeah.
experienced the shame and horror and pain that they had, not for punishment,
Yeah.
but for growth and edification, for the future time when you want to fix that, or you'll want to meet that person again.
Yeah.
And in whatever ways the mysteries of karma work, you'll want to compensate for your deed.
And this is
So
almost
all of
like,
what you're saying is really in all this in
yeah.
a pretty rich picture in a way.
Well, it's almost like you could say the daily review is like a micro version of this when we look back and reflect upon the previous, however long it was before we woke up or went to sleep.
Yeah.
Um, so it's almost like if you can almost have a sense of remorse, conscience, and metanoia, like to actually
Nice.
realize that the next day you can do better. I must do better. We can say to
Yeah.
ourselves, then we, I don't know if it alleviates like the end of life. So for instance, if you had no reflection in your life whatsoever, then there's probably going to be a big review to be shown. Whereas if you can do it daily, maybe it reduces it in some way or
Or
eases.
magnifies it, or makes it more efficacious for your development. Yes, all this. Think
Yeah,
about why the review is there. If Steiner's seeing of Kamaloka is there and he's going, let's see, I need to come up with exercises.
yeah,
And he
yeah,
goes, well, sure. This one is a microcosmic picture of what they're going to experience. Actually, you experience every time you fall asleep, right? Your astral body and your
yeah.
ego separate, and you weave the moral quintessence of that day's deeds of
Hmm.
thinking, feeling, and willing
Yeah,
into this moral tapestry that you'll meet when you die.
yeah, yeah.
Okay. And the other thing is really cool. Steiner says people think that their moral forces come out of their own soul.
Hmm.
He says that's preposterous.
Yeah,
You are given your moral forces every night when you fall asleep, and you excarnate out of your body, and the higher beings who are beings of morality, right? We're lost in trying to be moral. They're moral. They pour these forces into us. And
okay.
when we awaken, our forces are renewed again for the day. Isn't that
Yeah,
something?
yeah,
And
yeah.
what happens is materialism and dogmatic materialisms, and even say dogmatic humanism, even though I consider anthroposophy wondrously humanistic, but from a much larger picture of the human being,
Hmm.
that what happens is the structures of the soul become calcified and hindering, so that when you enter into sleep, it's harder and harder for the higher worlds to imbue you with moral forces for the next day.
Yeah, yeah,
Does that look familiar?
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Right?
definitely. Yeah,
That looks
yeah,
familiar to me. I go,
yeah,
yeah, okay, I get it now.
yeah,
This is what's going on,
yeah,
And they're even more prideful and arrogant about the fact of everything, No, humility. How come we're not being humble? Isn't that a goal? Isn't that an end goal?
yeah,
Humility,
yeah,
sacrifice, and caring for others and loving. How come that's not a goal? How come being a billionaire is a goal? That's insane. If I had a big enough coffin, I'd want to be a billionaire. Okay, I'd want to take it all with me.
Well, okay. I'm checking the time, and we've been going for some time. I think I might even split this into two. I'll double check when I come to do any edits how long it was, and then I may make it into part 4 and 5, but we'll see.
And it'd be wonderful anytime you want to talk more. We didn't, I have quite a bit of notes here. I did write up for a couple of hours the other day, and you're just too interesting. So we didn't really get a lot of that done.
Okay, so let me just book in part 6, 7, and 8. Anyway,
Yeah,
it's
anytime, sir.
Dale, it's a pleasure as always to speak to you and the listeners and the viewers of this podcast. I'm 100% sure that they will deeply appreciate our conversations, and I just want to say thank you once more for spending the time. And I do want to I want to respect your time as well, by not taking up too much. And I look forward to the next time we meet up. We left it quite a long time. I had quite a busy time last year, but hopefully we can catch up again. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you very much.
it's appreciated.
All blessings.
Yeah, and for the viewers, I will put some of the links to Dale's work in the description. Uh, I'll take this opportunity to ask everybody to subscribe. If you appreciate the work that we're doing, it makes a big difference to the algorithms. If you subscribe, also if you put likes, even more if you make a comment. You don't have to agree with everything we say. We're quite open to receive comments. But even better, if you do have any questions for future podcasts, then that would be really appreciated. So, bye for now, everyone. Thank you.
Goodbye. Take care.
Thank you.